And we're going to be continuing a look or actually beginning a new look at the subject of Christmas, because tonight begins the first of 4 weeks of Advent. And so the 4 Sundays before Christmas is referred to as the season of Advent. The word Advent means to come, and it's celebrating the coming of Christ to earth. And that's why we have different themes that go through the Advent season. And so I want you to be thinking about that as we begin tonight. Because tonight is the first night. I know you're thinking to yourself, I just had Thanksgiving. I'm still full for Thanksgiving, and now you're talking about Christmas. I can't handle it. Oh, I apologize. I didn't make the rules. That's just how it goes. They're 4 weeks before Christmas. That's how it goes. It's like this every single year. So you're making your transition from Thanksgiving to Christmas, and that begins tonight. So be thinking about that. Leo Tolstoy wrote a story about 2 men who were taking a journey from Russia to Israel, and they were walking there, traversing a continent from one part to the other on foot. And they knew it was going to be a long, long journey. And they were walking this journey together because these were 2 Russian Jews who had never been to Israel. It had been a lifelong dream to finally get to Israel. And they began their journey, and they were traveling for many, many weeks until they finally came into this little village, this little town. And they were struck by the fact that the place looked very dark and dismal. It looked very dead. And they couldn't figure out what was going on with this little town. And all the stores were kind of closed up, and no children playing in the streets, and nobody caring for the crops in the field. And they were very concerned about what was going on here. And they knocked on some doors, and there was no answer. And then finally they opened up a door, looked inside, and crept along around the bedrooms, and they found that there were all these people lying in their beds. And they looked, they thought, are these people all dead? And they looked carefully, said, no, they're not, but they're barely alive. Somebody has to come along here and help these people. And so one friend said, well, listen, I've got to go. We've got to go. We have a long journey to get to Jerusalem, and we can't stop now. The other friend said, but listen, these people need some help. You go ahead. I'll catch up with you a little bit later. You do your thing. And don't worry, it'll be fine. And then friend says, okay, I'll go and I'll catch up with you later. So he heads out. Then that other friend says, no, wait a minute, this is too big a job. I can't catch up with him. And he calls out to him and says, no, listen, I may not catch up with you. Go to Jerusalem and tell me about the trip. We'll see what God provides. Okay. And so he stayed in this town responding to what was going on there, and the other man kept his journey going. After many, many months, the man is making his journey back now from Israel to Russia, and he stops at this little village, and he says, this looks familiar. I mean, have I been here before? But it looks a little different, and he starts to inquire, what's going on here? Because is this the place that I left my friend? Because I see children playing in the streets, and I see the stores all open and selling things, and I see people in the fields tending to their crops. I see animals. I see life. I see people sitting on their porch. I see something going on here that's very fantastic. What happened? And he began to ask people, what happened here? And their answer to him was rather simple. They said, a man came to us and gave us back our life. And then he left. And so he thought to himself, that's my friend. And so he heads back to Russia, meets up with his friend, and they share their respective stories, but what their journeys were both alike. And as they share their journeys, Tolstoy, as he finishes the story, he doesn't give any kind of obvious moral of the story. He doesn't give any kind of principle, something that says, this is what they concluded. No, he doesn't do that. He lets the readers figure out what the bottom line story is. But there's an observation to be made here that's very clear. One man had a purpose, and his purpose was to get to a destination. The other man had a destination, and it was to fulfill his purpose. 2 very different things. One man saying, I've got to get over there to reach my destination. The other man saying, my destination is in how I treat other people, how I help them. And I think about that a lot because I've met too many people in my life who view life as being this destination that's way down there. It's that it's when I retire, then I'll be happy. Or when I get that new promotion, then I'll be happy. Once I get my first million, then I'll be happy. And they talk about these things as if I can't get happy unless I reach my destination. But the people who are most happy as Christians are people who look every day as a destination through which they can fulfill their purpose. Every single day is the day of destination, because this is the day I fulfill why God put me on planet Earth. That's where your joy is. It's not where I'm headed, it's where I am and how I'm interacting with the opportunities God gives me. So I want you to think about that, because as we go through this particular study in John chapter 1, we're going to look at how God is telling us we are called to be people of the light and what that means. So go with me to John chapter 1, and we're going to take a look at this fascinating chapter and what it has to offer us for Christmas time, particularly in understanding who Jesus is, why he's come, and why this issue of light and darkness is so powerful. John chapter 1, beginning at verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to the light, to testify concerning the light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. So here's the question that needs to be asked, because this is very clear. The word light and the word dark or darkness are two words that are discovered, just almost every chapter of the Bible, it seems, you'll find those two words being evident. There's something about light and something about darkness. And so the Bible describes this ebb and flow, this kind of strange dance in between light and darkness that takes place throughout the generations and throughout the thousands of years. And it's an amazing thing. Something is happening. God wants us to understand what's going on here, because clearly Jesus and his entry into the world and into planet Earth and into our lives is an entry of light confronting darkness. There's this experience where Jesus, as the light, is coming into a dark place, and he's confronting it and he's changing it. And so the world is about to be changed because light has entered the darkness. And those two things are evident everywhere you go. Let's take a look at some scriptures, because I want you to look at Genesis chapter 1. And I want us to compare Genesis 1 with John 1. Very interesting. In the beginning, it says there. Now look at John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. So both of those books begin by talking about what was going on at the very beginning of all things, when Jesus was there. Now, go back to Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? Go back to John 1:3. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. So the parallel between Genesis and John is rather profound. Go back to Genesis again. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. Now look at how John treats that. He says, "In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it." So that life was the light of man. The very life of Christ was the light for people. And so this light shines in the darkness, but the darkness can't make heads or tails of it. And so the parallel between Genesis 1 and John 1 is very interesting to watch. Both are talking about the difference between light and darkness, and what those really represent. So look at it this way. There's really two different kinds of light the Bible talks about. One is physical light, and that's the light that we see from the sun. We perceive God's handiwork that way. And so we declare God's light is everywhere. It's a wonderful thing. Can you imagine what it would be like if the sunlight wasn't present? How could you go week, month, years without any sunlight? You'd go crazy. I know I would. And it would be a difficult thing to experience. And the vegetation, the plants, what happens to them? Right? They're all struggling to survive. Plants are what's called phototropic. They appeal to, they desire, they lean toward the experience of the light. I have a plant in my office that I've been trying to kill for a long time now because I keep forgetting to water it. And I'm remembering that, oh yeah, water and light are two things that this plant needs. Two things that Jesus often told us was that I'm the water, I'm the wellspring of life. The Holy Spirit comes up inside of you through me and gives you what you need. And then he says, I am, John 8:12, the light of the world. I am the light that you're seeking. So as I look at this, I realize that just as I look up into the sky and I see that vegetation, life on earth, the trees, the grass, we all need the sun. And I realize that from the standpoint of spiritual life, we all need the sun. And God has so ordered it so that I get to understand how God operates if I understand how the world operates with the sun. Physical life needs physical light. Spiritual life needs spiritual light. And they will not operate if we don't have those two things. And so that's what he's telling us here. This light is the word, the presence, the truth, the eternity of Jesus. This is the light that is planting within us. Jesus is coming to not only declare that the light is here, but to impart the light to others. It is not enough that he says, oh, you need light. He's saying, I am the light. So he both declares it and he imparts it. And we both need what he is doing there. Now, darkness is the other side of this. Darkness is a word that's very evocative in the Bible because it really signals a kind of battle going on. It signals that if light represents God, dark represents the anti-God. It represents the wicked, and judgment and death, and salvation brings light to those in darkness. And so although darkness is opaque to man, it's transparent to God because God can veil himself in darkness in moments of great revelation. Remember, we sometimes think of darkness as being all bad and evil, but don't look at it that way. Look at it biblically. God created light and darkness long before sin ever arrived on the scene. Darkness was there before sin ever arrived. Darkness is a place that Satan hides in. Darkness is a place where evil hides and takes residence in, but it doesn't represent everything against God. God created the darkness. God rules over the darkness, but Satan chooses it as a place to present and to hide himself and to keep evil reigning. And that's a very important principle for us. So we see that God knows the darkness. He knows what it contains. He rules over the darkness because he created it. So as dark as the world will ever be in any way, shape, or form, we know that it is not a surprise to God. We know that God is not amazed that these things are happening on his watch. But God rules over the darkness. God is still ruler. As bad as things will ever get on planet Earth, and there are times, by the way, that as bad as things are right now, it's been a lot worse. Okay? I mean, we look at the news and we say, oh, this is as bad as it. No. It's been a lot worse than this. A lot worse than this. And you go back in history not too long, and you'll see it's been a lot worse than this. And it could get a lot worse than this. You say, well, Jesus has got to come because how bad it is. Well, maybe, but it's been worse. It's been worse. And God got us through those times. And God's going to get us through this time because he rules ultimately over all. And so God uses the darkness even for his own purposes. And we see that in the Old Testament quite a bit, where God may even use the activity of an evil nation to bring judgment upon Israel for some of the things that Israel did. So God will manipulate, if you will.